All right, well, thanks so much for that. Next, I want to bring up our panel discussion for this afternoon. I think many of you have seen, or I hope many of you have seen, increasing news from us at the Linux Foundation on our collaborative projects. Today we announced Zen. Last week we announced something called OpenDaylight, which is a project in the software-defined networking space. And you know, we host these projects for one simple reason. We feel it's our mission to spread the collaborative DNA of Linux to other industries, other companies, other projects. And we thought it would be interesting today to bring together a group of some of these projects to get a little bit more detail on what they're up to and how the Linux Foundation works with them. So I'd like to bring up our panelists. Why don't you all come on up on stage and I'll introduce you one by one. So I'd like to welcome, let's see, Lars, Mike, and Tracy. Where is Tracy?
Over here.
There we go. Come on up, everybody. So you guys can have a seat. We'll all sit down and I will introduce you. Go ahead. All right, so I'll start with Tracy over here.
No, I'm number 3.
What's that?
I'm number 3.
I'm going to put you on the spot and make you number 1. How many people here have heard of the Yocto Project? Yocto? Most of you, great. You know, we think this is a great project at the Linux Foundation. It provides all of the templates and tools and methods to create kind of your own custom Linux distribution for embedded projects. Tracy Irway is responsible for all of the strategic product and event marketing as the advocacy lead for the Yocto Project. So please welcome Tracy. Next in line here we have Mike Schoenberg, the original author of the code that went into the OpenMama Project. How many people here know OpenMama? Less than Yocto? That's shocking to me. Yeah.
Oh, I'm
Exactly.
sorry.
OpenMama is a middleware agnostic messaging API. It's a project that provides a lightweight integration layer for a variety of middleware systems. It's primarily used in the financial services industry and was originally developed in-house by NYSE Technology, so the New York Stock Exchange. So it's interesting to see that you know, such a conservative industry as the financial services industry is into open source. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
And finally, Lars Kurth is the community manager for the Zen Project, which we're announcing today as a Linux Foundation project. He's been doing this for over 2 years and was one of the driving forces of making the Zen Project happen. So welcome, Lars. I don't know if you explain Zen. I think most people know what the Zen Project is. So I want to just have a discussion with these folks about, you know, first of all, why each of their organizations or industries got into this form of collaborative development. Obviously, you know, Zen is a little bit different because you guys have been around for a long time, and Yocto and OpenMama are newer projects. But, you know, I thought I would start with Mike and put you on the spot, as Tracy wanted to go last, of course. But talk about, you know, this new trend of collaborative development, sort of that as table stakes, and sort of what led NYSE to say, hey, we want to share all this proprietary code with our competitors. Why did you do that?
Okay, well, I'm no longer with NYSE. I'm with a company called Quincy Data now, a startup that I joined recently. But while I was at NYSE, we had written OpenMama. It was originally called Mama, and it had become a de facto standard in the financial services industry for providing a consistent abstraction layer on top of message-oriented middleware. And what I think NYSE realized is that, you know, if we wanted to broaden our reach and get greater adoption of this API and really have it become the actual standard for messaging in the financial services industry, and I think, you know, NYSE and I personally still have the hopes that it will extend beyond financial services as well, is that the only way to do that was to make it a truly open source project. And that was a very difficult thing for any large corporation like NYSE, who's used to doing almost all of their business in secret and with proprietary code and proprietary software. So, but that was really the vision that we had, was we thought that we could increase adoption and really take this API to the next level. And
you know, I know there are people in the room who are working at organizations that are literally in the stages of looking at doing the exact same things that you did with OpenMama. In other words, they've got either some proprietary code or they're looking at collaborating on code with their competitors. The question I get all the time from people, and I want to ask you, Mike, is what was some of the specifics that were difficult in doing it, and what were some of the kind of epiphanies you had? Like, you know, what was it, licensing decisions? Was it structure of the project? Tell us about some of the specifics of how you did this.
I think it was all of the above. I mean, the first and possibly the most difficult and contentious part was actually deciding to do it and getting buy-in from the various people in the various businesses. You know, I think we've seen one of the competing attempts at open sourcing a market data API. They open sourced the headers, and we had that thought. We said, well, you know, we should open source the headers only. That should be enough. And I think one of the important things that we did very early on is we engaged the Linux Foundation and got a lot of very good advice from them in terms of, you know, if you open source the headers, no one's going to come. You really need to, you can't just dip your foot in and, you know, and then decide whether to dive in. You have to really dive in. And it took a lot of meetings and a lot of discussions, and they went from very, very conservative approaches to, at the end, we actually open sourced a lot more than we'd originally ever thought we would. And there are also the legal challenges as well. I mean, our NYSE's House Counsel was not familiar with open source, so there was a lot of getting them up to speed and understanding what the implications were, and also making sure that NYSE protected the things and the assets that they wanted to maintain as proprietary. And I think that it took a lot of time and effort from everyone involved.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the feedback I get from people always is, we kind of get that this works, we understand the power of it. Now we need to specifically understand how to go about doing this. And you know, maybe Yocto went through a similar stage, Tracy. The interesting thing about Yocto is it came out of Intel, right? But I'd love to hear, partially out of Intel, partially out of other projects, but Intel was the big first backer. But it seems like there's lots of other architectures working on Yocto right now. The question I have for you is, same as the question for Mike, what first motivated the Yocto project to go get started? And then what were some of those early key decisions that have made it such a diverse set of participants in the overall project itself?
It's a long story, so I'll try to make it short. But the Yocto project really always had its start in open source. Mm-hmm. Through Open Embedded, right, through Richard Purdy, who was working with Open Embedded. And so Richard, who is now a fellow at the Linux Foundation, it was a natural progression for us to continue along the open source path. And also the Yocto project, I may work for Intel, but the Yocto project really solves embedded industry problems. They aren't Intel problems. They aren't, you know, some other architecture problems. They are problems that everyone faces, and so our customers really benefit from it. So open source is totally non-threatening from an individual corporation's point of view. So it was a natural progression, totally non-threatening, great solutions for our customers. And you know, at some point, I'd like to talk about working with the Linux Foundation, but the Linux Foundation made the process easier for us in 100 million different ways. And I don't think it's anything that Intel could have pulled off on its own or any of the other advisory board members that we have with the Yocto project. Yep. So and I think the results are really showing how well a project can be kicked off cross-archecturally and through the Linux Foundation and be successful in that route and be highly successful in that route.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, what we're seeing is there's lots of different homes for open source project. Throw it up on GitHub, right? You can bring it to the Apache Software Foundation. The Linux Foundation does some of this work as well, and I think all of them are options depending on what you're looking for. I obviously love the Linux Foundation, but the question I get from people though is, what advice would you give? I'm thinking about doing this. I'm just starting it out. What advice would you give from the Yocto Project's perspective to other? Kind of similar question to Mike. What would you tell some of these other folks out in the audience who are thinking about doing these kind of projects? Any advice?
About kicking off a project?
Yeah, kicking off a project, how they should structure it, what considerations.
First of all, you need a really kick-ass marketing department.
There you go.
Let me just put it out there. So I'll tell you what we got through working through the Linux Foundation, because these were all key things that we had to have, and then I'll give you your turn, swear to God. You need, let's just take it for granted that you have great code and you really have something that solves a problem that isn't just a solution looking for a problem.
Right.
And so you need legal help. We got legal help from you guys. You need business development assistance. The Linux Foundation sort of, and I'm not just touting the Linux Foundation, but these are all the components that were really important. We needed someone to help us bring together everyone who would be on our advisory board, which is throughout the community. It's TI and Intel and Wind River and Mentor Graphics and Juniper Networks and all the people that I'm not saying that I'll get in trouble for. But there are so many folks involved in it that it's really key to keeping the project universally focused for the whole embedded environment and community. I would have to say that it helped develop our community. Legal help, business development, marketing help, it helps us with, we have an avenue for PR. We don't always have a message that's really big that a company would want to put out, but we have a message that with a lot of other companies on this project, we can create a bigger message that's worthwhile going out on the wire. Tech marketing, Rudy's doing all kinds of training and development in that way, and without training worldwide, you don't build that community and expertise. So all these individual things that you have to think about doing above and beyond the legal aspects of releasing the code and the licensing and whatever.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It sounds like that's
business.
Maybe that's the difference between just throwing code up on GitHub and working to make sure that there's trained practitioners, that there's awareness, so that you can get more people into the coding party. I think we all agree that code is the fundamental ingredient that makes any type of open source or collaborative project work. Now with Zen, you guys have been around for a long time, right? And I know one of the goals, Lars, with you was, it was important that the Zen project be at a place that is clearly neutral, is clearly a long-term home for that. How big of a factor was that in some of the changes that you guys are making around the Zen project? And just tell me why you're doing that and why now.
Well, the project's been around for 10 years. For the last 2 years, we've basically been on a journey to formalize our governance a bit more. In some sense, actually, if you look at the Zen project, there's quite a lot of analogies with the kernel community. We have the same license, same roles, DCO and all that, and so moving to the Linux Foundation was basically, the most natural fit, because the way how
just so everyone's clear, previously Citrix was, just to be clear in terms of, because some people might not be fully aware, just describe the kind of before and after.
Yeah, so before, fundamentally, Citrix was the sponsor and guardian of the project. It had a diverse community of about 100 to 200 developers, depending on, it always varies depending on the release cycle, and up to sort of 30 organizations contributing. And what we're seeing now is basically those organizations, coming together as part of, the collaborative project and the Linux Foundation, really to drive forward the project.
Right.
And and the Linux Foundation, has a track record in doing that. It has a vibrant, large, ecosystem. around it, and there's just all these synergies, which I think the Zen Project will ultimately benefit from in the long run.
One thing I've been noticing about the Zen Project is the amount of code that's increased quite a bit just in the last few years. What do you know what's driving that? I mean, just to get an update on what's going on in the Zen.
Well, the community has been diversifying. There's also been a couple of new initiatives. One is driven by the emergence of ARM-based servers. So, of course, new ports, new code means new development, means new vendors and companies engaging with your project. Another one is Mirage, which is Zen has this idea of sub-projects. And we have an incubator, and just at the beginning of the year, Cambridge University, which developed this thing called Open Mirage, basically approached us. Well, let's go through the community process and see, whether we can, get accepted as into the Zen Project incubator. And so all these sort of new initiatives around the hypervisor itself, I think that's sort of driving that activity.
Okay. So where do you see the next few years of the Zen Project looking like? I mean, if you just can project out into the future, I want to ask this of each of you. What's next for OpenMama and Yocto and Zen? I'll start with Lars and go over. But now that you've sort of established your communities, you have a IP management regime, you have a governance structure, you have a promotional vehicle, now what are you guys all really concentrating? What's next for each of your respective projects? I'll start with you, Lars.
So I think one of the things which are particularly relevant, for me and the Zen Project is, if you look at the Zen's history, it was like very much just developers only. And also we have a really large user base. As a project, we haven't really worked, and engaged the users so much. And I think one of the things which we can do as part of the Linux Foundation is really focus on that. Of course, the other thing is grow the contributor base, through engaging and working with the Linux Foundation membership. And one of the really interesting things, about the announcement as well is that we actually have large users of Zen, now actively engaging into, and investing into the project, which wasn't happening that much before.
Right. How about you, Mike? What's next for OpenMama?
I think on two fronts, sort of in our vertical in financial services, what I'd like to see is more of the smaller and even the larger market data and feed handler vendors adopt OpenMama and really have it become more pervasive. It's already used in some capacity by most of the industry, but I think that to fully realize its power, and we have people on our steering committee, who banks customers, clients on the steering committee, who find this very important, is they really want one API and one infrastructure in their data center, and to be able to pick best of breed. And just to that point, I think the Linux Foundation was very important in providing us credibility with our competitors. Because if NYSE had gone alone and tried to open source it, I think we would have gotten a much colder reception than we have. Yeah. And then on the second front, what I would like to see is broader adoption, in the world, of OpenMama outside of financial services. And I think we've made a few steps in that direction. We now have a Cupid bridge that Red Hat has contributed to the project, so we have an open source middleware. I would like to see some open source payload bridges developed and bridges for 0MQ, possibly integration with JMS. And I think there are a lot of good ideas out there that people have been throwing around, and that will really get an open source base for it, because OpenMama sits in the middle, and there's a piece that has to go on the bottom. And right now, only part of that solution through the Cupid bridge is open source. And I believe they're going to do that Cupid has a payload as well. And once we get there and we have a full end-to-end open source solution, I'm hoping that we get even broader adoption outside of that and really get some more momentum behind the project.
Cool. Tracy, how about Yocto? I see, products that are created now with Yocto. I see it across all sorts of different architectures. What do you guys have in store for Yocto? Where do you see it going?
We're not going to do anything more.
Nothing.
We're all done.
No. Same. Funny. That's what Linus was saying about Linux just this morning. It's the same thing.
We're so excited. We're really excited about our project, and we've always had or tried to have a strategic plan, what we wanted to do, somehow reach the community, get accepted, keep our advisory board growing. I think that what's on our plan moving forward, and if anyone on the Yocto Project is out there and I'm wrong, just jump up and tell me, but we have a compliance program that's very important to us, and we want to be able to grow products that are compatible with the Yocto Project and participants in the Yocto Project, which are both part of that compliance program. And we're starting to see RFPs come in to various companies that are requesting that it's Yocto Project compliant, which is really exciting. We feel like with our fabulous community manager, Jeffro, and with the Linux Foundation, that we've really developed or started to develop a great community. And now we need to take the next step and figure out how do we acquire worldwide domination, which is the next part. But no, worldwide, how do we get users? How do we do the training, and how do we bring people who don't normally talk about Linux, use Linux, or even have considered the Yocto Project come in? And we want to start working with universities, because we think that low level, just like in the talk before about parallel computing, teach people right off the bat who are interested in the embedded industry to be able to use something that works. Right. And those are probably the key things. I think we're getting a lot of interest in vertical markets, and hopefully those questions will be resolved. We'll be talking a lot about vertical markets and how it grows in terms of those kinds of features too. So.
Great. Well, I don't want us to do all the talking. I knew there's a few people out here who are interested in, again, doing similar kind of things with other technology. So I thought I'd open it up for just the last few minutes we have to a couple of questions for the audience, if you have them. So I don't know if there's a mic running around back there somewhere. There it is, right in the middle. So we'll open it up for questions if anyone has one. I'm completely blinded by this light, so I can't see. We don't have one question?
We told them everything.
All right. I thought Bradley back there in the back would at minimum have one question related to DRM. What? I know, but I just figured, you're on a roll. All right. Well, I mean, we got one right here in the front.
So my question is.
Hey, we got a mic right here.
Oh, thank you. My question is, OpenMama, how it compares to RabbitMQ and SilverMQ, or how it feels in that area?
It actually sits above RabbitMQ and ZeroMQ. As I said, we have a Cupid bridge. So OpenMama provides a consistent API on top of the message-oriented middleware. It provides the API in Java, C, C++, and .NET. It's, in some sense, similar to JMS, but it's not limited to Java only. And it doesn't, JMS sort of locks you into this message broker model that we're, in financial services, we're really more about pub sub and multicast messaging. So it's a slightly different idiom, but it sits above those. So it's sort of a unifying API that would sit above those middlewares.
I got one more back there.
Yeah, I have a question about the OpenMama. I tried the OpenMama. It's really, I think, very fun project, but it's kind of deep for the technology side. So is there something we can do besides the technology thing for the OpenMama community?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we like people to contribute in any way possible to the OpenMama project. I think we tend to focus on the code because the code is the important thing, and that's certainly what I spent most of a large part of my career focused on. But I mean, training, documentation, QA, really even being an evangelist in marketing and telling people that it's there, because I think outside of the little box that I live in, most people don't even know what it is. So certainly you can contribute in any, in any way, in any of those ways, and others that I'm sure I missed as well.
Yeah, and I think I know that one of the goals we have at the foundation in working with any of these projects is it is more than just pick a license, choose governance, which are in and of themselves not actually the easiest decisions in the world. They have long-lasting ramifications. They can make or break a community early on. But also, how do you provide developer training, both for end users and also developers who want to come in and participate in the project? How do you just get people together like this so that they can, in a face-to-face way, collaborate on it, evangelize it to other groups and so forth? And so I think that's a great example of where, with OpenMama, one of the goals I know for the project is, let's get more people trained up on this technology, let's get people in adjacent industries using it and so forth. So I think that's a big benefit.
Question?
Yeah, Tracy.
I actually do have a question because I don't know anything else I don't know about the governance models of these other projects. I just wonder, do all projects sort of collect funds universally from their members and then divvy it out where you need it? And do you apply funds to documentation and, marketing and all that kind of stuff?
To a greater or significantly lesser degree, I guess, is the important part.
Really
maybe Mike, you can just answer, and Lars, you can answer about sort of what, obviously, NYSE Technologies or your company see this as an important part of their long-term technology bet. They're not just going to let this thing go, and I love GitHub, and it's great, but they're not just going to go throw it up on a Forge or on GitHub and let it sit there, right? So tell us about how you guys underwrite this.
It was very important when we started OpenMama that we had a diverse representation from the industry that included not only NYSE Technologies, but people who competed directly with NYSE Technologies. In fact, we wanted, sort of the more adversarial our relationship was, those were the people that we wanted because we really were committed to, and still are committed to, having an open standard. And, to that end, we have a steering committee, and steering committee members contribute funds. They pay to be members of the steering committee, and we use that to fund the project, to really run a project of this scale, and that people rely on, for robustness and everything else. That this, runs very critical systems that, throughout the financial services industry. You need that funding because you can't just rely on the goodwill and people participating. So for things like documentation, even development, or QA, build farms, developing training, developing neutral marketing materials, all of those things require funding. So we definitely collect money and spend it where the steering committee thinks that it would be best put to use.
Yeah, Lars, I assume that's the truth.
Yeah, and it's exactly the same, for the Zen Project as well, and common good things as build farms, test infrastructure, all those kind of things, and also helping make marketing and outreach more of a shared resource or a shared initiative rather than just relying on one organization in the community to do that. Which does have significant drawbacks because then you get associated with just doing the marketing for the project.
Yeah, but the interesting point here that Tracy, I think, brings up, and what I'm seeing a lot is, last week, I'll give you an example. We just launched this OpenDaylight project. Has anybody heard of software-defined networking and OpenDaylight? Most of you heard about this, right? This is an incredibly hot new area in networking, obviously. But what's interesting is, networking, surprisingly, is a somewhat conservative sector of technology. And a lot of the interaction that we had found, many of the networking companies were working under, was standard setting. And this comes to how you underwrite this stuff, which are, you sort of pay to be in the standards body, you pay to get access to the specification, you pay to be a part of the decision making, all of it is sort of a pay-to-play type of model. And every call, every briefing we were on announcing OpenDaylight, which is an open source project under an open source license with a elected technical steering committee. Anybody can participate, anybody can contribute anything. Almost every first question was, so do I have to pay to participate in the project? And we didn't. No, you don't have to pay. And I think this is a new form of kind of ISOs or standard setting budget where you're paying to underwrite technology that you truly care about long term, but you're not saying only the people who pay can participate in the project. That's just, I don't know why that's so hard for people to understand these days, but that seems like one of the big things that I think our community needs to keep communicating, which is, we've moved beyond this sort of pay-to-play world. Now we're in a world where we get open source works, but if we want to do it at scale, like Yocto, like OpenMama, like the Zen Project, like OpenDaylight, we also want, the people who are going to benefit from the most from this to underwrite it. And that seems to be working. And not just at the Linux Foundation. I mean, we see this all over the place with others, similar foundations or similar efforts. And so I think on the pay side, that's what I'm seeing as sort of the difference in this new world. We have time for just one more question, and then we're going to wrap it up. Okay, go ahead.
So my question is, talking about the diversity on the open source, kind of like VI versus Emacs, and KVM versus Zen. Why would I use Zen today?
I knew it happened. I was just waiting for the KVM versus Zen question.
Well, I mean, both solutions have different trade-offs, and if you look at performance, or for example, different workloads will have, will work differently. One workload might work better on KVM, the other one on Zen. So at the end of the day, it just gives you more choice. And I think, particularly from Zen's perspective, I think where it sort of stands out is around the architecture, which gives you a lot of isolation and security. And of course, it's been around for a long time, proven at really large scale at Amazon, for example, Rackspace, and many other organizations. And I think that that's one of the things which I would recommend to look at.
Yeah, and I mean, Linux Foundation, I wrote a big blog piece on this morning. We love them both, right? We obviously do work for both the KVM guys, and you see them at all of our events, and we host training initiatives in the KVM forum at the Linux Foundation and so forth. Lars is obviously going to speak on behalf of Zen, but I don't think we're in this world of, KVM versus Zen, that everybody sees that virtualization is critical and that there are lots of different options out there. All right, well, with that, I'd like to thank our panelists. We're going to take a break, and we'll see you back here in, 3:15. We'll see you back here. Thank you.